Hello everyone, I'm Chara and welcome back to my creepy Catwalk commentary for one last hurrah to recap each and every episode of the Boulet Brothers Dragula Season 5. Well y'all, it's over. We finally have a winner. This is the last time you'll have to hear me complain about the show, at least here, in this format. But I won't stop complaining about things over on my Twitch streams. So if you want to hear more of that for Drag Race and everything else going forward, be sure to drop a follow over there. The link is down in the description for that. And while you're wiggling around down there, why don't you go ahead and hit that darling little subscribe button while you're at it? Drop a like, leave a comment even. I would ever so appreciate it. Every subscriber we get gets us one step closer to becoming part of the YouTube Partner Program and being able to actually earn some income off of the work that I've been doing on all of these over the last few months and all the work that I've got coming up. I feel so little and dainty on this screen today, but it's because I wanted to fit my entire crown on camera. I only have a few weeks before my bar title step down, so I just kind of want to relish in it a little bit. Take a little moment, enjoy my last few seconds as a title holder before I dramatically scale back my presence in my local scene to focus on stuff like this, doing some traveling, maybe going to some conventions, maybe taking some out-of-state gigs. We'll have to see. You know, 2024 has a lot of opportunity ahead of us, so who knows what I'll be doing. I do know that balancing streaming, my artwork for the content, my artwork that I'm getting paid to do for commission work, and all of the video editing and all the filming, getting in drag for all of that, it's a lot. But here we are, y'all, the final episode. So let's get into it, shall we? This episode is interesting to me, just in terms of structure, because one thing I cited earlier in my reviews is that I felt like this season's editing and pacing didn't make a lot of sense. And I often left an episode feeling like I had been put through tonal whiplash. And for me, this episode does it quite a bit too. So we get our opening little cutscene with the Boulets talking about how, who knows what will happen in this finale. And we've made it to the end. We've seen so many people die. We've seen so many incredible looks and performances. And at the end of it all, only one can take the crown. Will they be covered in blood like a normal season, or will they just show us a picture in a hallway? And I do really appreciate the fact that they made a self-aware joke about that. I thought that was very funny. Where the pacing got thrown off for me, we had this opening scene, then we had the intro credits, and then it immediately goes into a solo interview with Throb, talking about their mental health struggles and how it affects how they navigate things with people. And honestly, as somebody who's been very critical of Throb and has not really been a big fan of their behavior on the show and their behavior that I've heard about off the show, I honestly think that the explanation of how Throb navigates relationships with people and just navigates communicating with others around them, I feel like it actually makes a lot of sense. It really started to connect all the dots for me as to where a lot of the comments come from as a self-defense thing to cope with the mental health. Not that that's an excuse. I personally believe that mental health issues of any kind can certainly explain a behavior, but it doesn't always excuse it. 9 times out of 10, I would say, does not excuse the behavior. I still have my problems with Throb. Just as somebody who struggles with mental health problems myself, I can at least feel for Throb on a human level. So I think Throb is a very talented artist, a very skilled performer. I wish them well in terms of their mental health journey, and I hope things get better for them. I'm gonna talk about the rest of the solo interviews shortly after this because I don't want the pacing of this episode to be all wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. After Throb's interview with this, it then cuts immediately into them walking into the lab. It's the beginning of the episode, talking about being in the top 4 and having to get ready for their looks. And then it goes into, I believe, Blackberry's solo interview. And then they get their challenge from the Boulets on the runway, and not in a video form. The Boulets are in person for this. Then we get Neo's interview. And then there's another little segment. And then we get Orc's interview. And the way it's broken up, it's really heavy, emotional stuff that each person is talking about. It's kabam, back to the show, back to the competition. By the time you kind of get into that situation of hearing their stories, which I wish we would have heard more of throughout the season, it's kind of lost its effect. I just don't think that choice was necessarily the best one that could have been made for how to structure the episode as a whole. But going back to the interviews, Blackberry's interview talks about how Hurricane Harvey made her lose her home and drag was what paid all the bills. She's a professional working girl. I struggle doing more than 2 shows a month sometimes, coming up with new stuff, new looks, new mixes. There's a lot that goes into performing. Doing it 5 days a week and hosting, going wherever you have to go to get all of that done just to secure your bag to pay your rent. So mad respect and props to her. Also like massive respect for like doing everything that she can to take care of her family. I know it's not easy. Neo's struggle, personally for me, was the one that hit home the hardest, because for me it was the one that I personally related to the most, especially as a trans person myself, and a trans person who has a very conservative family who views me in a very particular way. So her talking about how she's changed so much, she's done all of this stuff, and all she wants is like the validation of her family and for her family to be proud of her, but she retreats inside of herself, she goes back into her shell, and she diminishes her light to please her family, just to make things easier. And that's something that I often have to do. So I totally understand on like an empathetic level how difficult that is. However, I know there's a very much added ethnic culture component to all of that too, with having like a very traditional Chinese family. I feel like her struggle is even more compounded than what mine is. And mine, for the most part, is like pretty tolerable. I mean, it shouldn't be. I have a lot of respect for her in that regard, and Drax says it in her critiques at the end that she like thinks that that's gonna ultimately end up getting in her way. For me, that was something that like I think she will definitely have to tackle it head on and confront it. Hopefully things will be better. Her not being able to like really be her full authentic self and having to like kind of lower herself for her family is ultimately going to harm her. It hit me in a way I wasn't expecting it to, honestly, and I'm like kind of getting a little emotional talking about it now, because it's something I'm gonna have to do, and it's something that like I think I needed to hear somebody say. It's something you're gonna have to confront one day. I feel more myself being openly queer around family, but I know some of them can't handle that or don't want to acknowledge it, and I think if I would add the trans stuff on top of it, it would just kind of be like the elephant in the room that nobody would talk about. However, I don't really care. I'm gonna make them talk about it. That's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. So we'll see. Orgotic's interview though also really touched me, because Orc saying like the best thing that ever happened to them as a kid was their parents getting divorced. How they want to use this money to like be able to take their mom around the world and like show her all the things that the world has to offer, because she's never really been able to do that. That got me real good. Maybe I'm just very painfully single, but this got me together real good, and it was just like, that's so sweet. And I love that. And I really hope that whatever opportunities come Orgotic's way due to the show allow him to do all of that. Getting into the challenges this week. This is the classic Dragula finale, where each finalist will have to present a look that embodies filth, horror, and glamour, the three tenets of Dragula, as 3 individual floor shows. The glamour floor show, however, has the added layer of having to learn a special lip sync to perform in that look. This episode, when you get into everything after this beginning bit, this is exactly how I want a Dragula episode to be formatted. There was no drama. Really, the most drama we got, they talked a little bit about Orc and Neo's relationship and like how that was at the reunion and how it seemed like something had happened. I know Orc has said basically online whatever happened between them is realistically only their business, which I think is incredibly respectable. And I think with drag and reality TV contestants and just like the very personal nature that drag often has with the audience in terms of like connection, parasocial relationships are very easy to form, and they form at a much higher like per capita rate within drag than any other industry I've ever seen. So I think there's a lot of fans who have developed a parasocial relationship regarding Orgotic and Yuhulu and their relationship, and they want to know all the little details because it was on the show and we feel like we know them. We want to support their relationship. We want to know every little juicy detail. Like, we are not owed anything as the audience. I think some folks need to kind of slow their roll a little bit. So the way that they structured this finale, after they were told what the 3 categories were, we got to see each of the 4 concepting, designing, and crafting their individual looks for each category before those individual floor shows. And they would talk about products that they were using, techniques they were using, how everything was coming together. This right here, this was what I wanted out of this season. And I know they can only do it with so many people at this degree of like complexity, but I think there is nothing wrong with showing more of that. It would eliminate the airtime that they would fill with the pointless drama, and then we could have saved some of that for later on. And I know They're in the business of television. They're out to make entertaining TV. However, for me as a viewer, maybe I've just gone soft, but I like seeing people just make things, do their own thing, and just progress in the competition. The drama on the side can be fun, it can be nice, whatever. But for me, it is not an essential part of the viewing experience. It's an additional seasoning that can sometimes make the show significantly better or can make it significantly worse. I just wish they would have done more of this creative stuff because that's what they told us at the beginning of the season we would be getting. Perhaps that's on me for putting my expectations a little too high. I wish that it would have been more developed through the season. So what we're going to do now is go over each of the looks throughout this episode. We've got a lot of looks to go over. We've got 3 categories, 4 contestants, and on top of that, we also have crowning looks to talk about for each of these 4. I would say something about the Boulet brothers looks this week, but quite frankly, I just didn't like them, so I don't want to talk about them. I had a very viscerally negative reaction when I first saw them, so we'll leave it at that. This episode of Catwalk commentary, as I push it off the ledge, is sort of pivoting softly to my newer content we've been putting out. Alrighty, first up, my least favorite category of the 3 and one that I routinely have to walk away from or skip through because I get nauseous is filth. I'm just going to talk about each individual category one by one. It looks from the monsters in the same order, not in the order that they were presented in the show. Starting off, we have Blackberry with this possum look. Now, I thought the idea was honestly kind of giving. They had this really skittish demeanor to how they moved around the stage, and with their prosthetic with the nose, it wasn't attached all that well because they kept kind of like flopping around, but I also think that it kind of worked for the possum aesthetic just because of like the wiggly nose. It kind of made them seem a little more like jumpy. I didn't really care for the fursuit as much. I thought the body looked great with it, but I think that the head and the makeup and the scraggly hair and stuff looked really desecrated. It looked kind of creepy and decrepit. The bodysuit, I think, was a little too clean, and I know that's an issue that Blackberry has had in previous episodes where it just seemed a little too put together, but also like mad props to them for like ripping through a raw fish. It's still gaggy. It's like both in the vomit way and like the shock way. I didn't expect her to go that far with it, and if had the prosthetic not come off, I think it would have been more successful. Dare I say, she might have had a very, very solid chance at taking the crown with this package, because she was coming at everyone's throats for these looks. I wasn't expecting this level of filth from her, so I still wish she went a little grimier with the body and like distressing the costume and staining it and stuff, but overall, I still think it's pretty good. Neo's look is the one that had the most social impact, and what I liked about Hoso's look last season was it was filthy, it was disgusting, and it was hard to watch, but it was also such a huge social commentary piece, and so is Neo's, about being sexualized and fetishized and kind of treated like a piece of meat, like an animal that's just thrown away when you're done, especially as like an Asian woman and a trans woman on top of that. I thought this was a very interesting spin to take on it. This was the simplest makeup I think she's done the entire season in terms of just the actual face. I know she was incorporating the raw meat like through the look and through everything else. I thought it was a really interesting visual composition, even though this look was gross, especially for me as somebody who like does not like touching food and refuses to work in food service because of it. Like, this is disgusting to me on that level, but as somebody who understands how it feels, like this is what it feels like this truly is what it feels like as a trans person oftentimes navigating dating and relationships. You feel like you're just nothing but a piece of meat to them, to a lot of these guys. Rob Zombie's look here, I personally think as a concept is so stupid in the best way. I think this is so funny. Just like the idea of, well, what's gross? That glob of hair that's stuck in your drain. But what if I was that glob of hair as like a sex demon? Complete with the drain. The drain headpiece is so big-brained. Honestly, I thought they were just gonna be like covered in hair, which to me is like, I can't let my hair air dry because it drives me nuts having wet hair. So being covered in wet hair like that, and wet synthetic hair at that, I would be going nuts. I will say I do agree with the critiques from the Boulets that it lost some of the filth effect when they were just like washing themselves and kind of having like the loofah and the car wash. I get they were like having like the soapy water like in their mouth and stuff, and like it was coming out of their mouth, like dripping down their face and stuff. It didn't feel like super filthy. Like I feel like they took it more in like a raunchy direction versus gross. I don't think this was as like gross out of a performance as what they could have done. There's a little piece of me that was like, we saw Bitch in season 2 do something that was gross with water and cleanliness sanitation things, and also incorporated hair. I think that had Throb gone a little bit more in that direction, gross, I think it would have read a little bit better. Of the performances, this was the weakest of the 4. In terms of the looks, I still liked it, and I thought it was very fun. When Organic was talking about their concept for this look, I laughed a lot. Just because you have like Blackberry going, I'm gonna be a possum, and blah 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 blah. Neo having this like very thought-provoking commentary moment of like what she's doing. Throb talking about being like this gross shower gunk creature. And then Organic was like, I'm gonna be a slug I saw on the floor in the bathroom one day. It's so silly. It's so silly and so unserious. But this was gross. Organic looked straight up like a turd. And I mean that in the best way. Like, you know, this is like when you got a wild poop that gotta get the poop knife for. It was effective. The performance of it was creepy. It was gross, it was slimy. I know Organic's gag of making themselves throw up with their tail and their fingers didn't work, but the second I realized they were like tipping the tail backwards to try to make themselves throw up, I knew immediately what it was, and I knew I had to go, because I cannot, no thank you, I cannot watch people make themselves throw up. For me, I'm glad it didn't work, but for them, disappointed it didn't work, because it definitely cost them some points. Going into the horror category, starting off again, we have Blackberry. This whole cage apparatus with this Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets Hellraiser meets Texas pageantry sort of vibe, I was very intrigued by it. I thought it could have been better. I didn't like the lips, like the cartoon lips on the face. I think had there just been like a silicone piece that had been attached and it was like gross and all of that, I think it would have been a little bit better. I think the different skin color choices were all really like cohesive color palette wise. It was really effective. Like the chains, the pulley system, tugging the dress in all these different directions. I think that the look itself maybe could have been textured in a way or painted to look a bit more like skin. I don't know, I'm kind of torn about the rhinestones. I don't think it needed them, but it really did have that like sense of poise of Texas pageant drag. So I was here for that. I thought this was a cool idea. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, oh, what's the character? There's a boss in Silent Hill. A little bit of Mary from Silent Hill, from the first game, I believe. There's a number of Silent Hill bosses where they're like in cages. The flesh lip, I'm looking at the Silent Hill wiki now, and I will put a picture on screen for context. This is kind of what it gave me a little bit, but like draggy. I think had there been more like transformation beyond very like well-known silhouette, I think Blackberry would have taken the category for horror. Okay, up next we have Nia Hulu. Her horror look, I honestly thought was more effective with the straitjacket on. I didn't like the prosthetic work, I didn't like the look of the character underneath it. I thought the 3D printed like skeletal aperture stuff was cool, but I don't think it was necessary. I honestly think had she just been this like deranged creature from an asylum that had been captured and was being studied and like really sold the horror with the movements, it would have been more effective. What I was very tickled by as she's talking about this look, the symbols on the straitjacket were all like negative terms, negative words used against her. And she said she was incorporating some positive ones in there too, and I can't remember if those were in the first look or the second one. The first thing that came to mind was like, this is a This Is Me outfit. Every drag performer of a certain age has a look that is just like a slur dress. And to me, I'm like, oh, this is Neo doing the slur dress, but good. And this was giving that sort of energy. But I loved the level of detail in that first look. That straitjacket turned into like almost like a coat dress moment was so cool. Just from a design perspective, it was so fashion forward, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So then when she took it off, and then she had this like really crappy wig with this makeup and this kind of alien demon character underneath it that I don't think really ultimately was as effective as the before. I don't think it was a great reveal. The post reveal has to be more exciting than the pre, and she went the opposite way with it. So to me, I don't think this was as good as what it could have been. So Throb's look I thought was interesting. I liked the idea of this enslaved princess phantom character, kind of like shackled up and forced to suffer through femininity by being pregnant, and the gown. I actually really liked the outfit. I actually really liked the robe, especially. Thought was really particularly beautiful, but I just didn't think it was horror. Like, it didn't read as a horror character. It read as like a dark fantasy character, which can certainly be horror, but I just did not think that it was effective on the scare. Like, when I think of a horror category, I want to be unsettled in the same way that I'd be unsettled seeing a monster. Throb's look also reminds me of a video game boss character, or just a video game character in general, but more in like a fantasy setting. I don't think this would necessarily be a significant character or like a significantly scary boss, but it does kind of give me like that world a little bit. And I do agree with the critiques that it was a little bright in color in terms of the pinks. They didn't read as like dark blood reds. I don't think it ultimately came together at the level it needed to be successful enough to win. Orgotic's horror look, however, this also gave me Silent Hill a little bit. And the teeth, I don't understand how they worked. It looked so freaking scary. And I've said before that Orgotic's drag reminds me of like low poly PS1 models in horror games. This really did. And I think of the four, this was the most effective on the scare factor. It all came down to the way Orgotic performed it. I know that Blackberry kind of read Orgotic for using the arms from the Terror in the Woods look as the legs in this one, but I also think there is a level of ingenuity with being able to like deconstruct your looks from previous things, repurpose it, and completely transform it into something else. Had that not been pointed out, I genuinely don't think I would have noticed it. But I also really appreciated that Orgotic's look was a reference to his favorite style of special effects that aren't super clean, super polished, but they're so effective. And I think that's a really great way to describe Orgotic's drag. It isn't the most like put together streamline. It is kind of crunchy in places. It doesn't look like super high budget. And I actually really like that about Orgotic's drag. I find it really refreshing. And I think that Orgotic was really effective in delivering that point of view in this character. I didn't know the song they lip synced to, but I did like it. I thought it was cute. Getting into these glamour looks. Blackberry with this elevated, very pageanty Bride of Frankenstein. This is immaculate. This is like perfection from top to bottom. The hair, the makeup, the jewelry, the silhouette of the dress, and just everything. It was so good. It got me together. I loved the reveal cape. Like, just the way it moved and on stage and how precise her performance was. I was so in. I was so enraptured by it. I know the Boulets kind of critiqued it not being an original idea and everybody has a Bride of Frankenstein look. You cannot deny that this look was incredible. And what a note to go out on, my god. Nia Hulu's look specifically is a reference to Ursula, and what I like about her look is that it's not super direct as a reference. And what I found refreshing about her look is the dress itself is actually quite simple. The real statement of it is the bottom structure with the tentacles. The way it would spin when she would move, it had this like really natural undulation quality to it. And I didn't see any seams in the dress. So whoever made it, whether it was her or somebody else, like, good job to them. It's a really well-made piece that moves in a really interesting way on stage. What confused me about her look, though, is that when it's presented, she has blue arms and she has this full face prosthetic that kind of gave me Cthulhu vibes a little bit, with the little tentacle mouth. It looked really cool. I didn't think it was particularly glamorous, though. And then in the lip sync, this makeup, oh my god. Honestly, how dare she? Like, I think this is the best makeup she has had the entire season. And she's had consistently strong makeup, consistently strong looks, but holy shit, this was gorgeous. Like, it was so good. Just the close-ups of the face with the hair and like the tentacles kind of wrapped around the updo. I loved it. I loved it so much. And again, her makeup here is really simple, and she lets kind of the pearl work and the beading do a lot of the work for her. What I loved about it was that it wasn't symmetrical. It had this kind of really organic, natural shape and curve to everything. It was really aesthetically pleasing. Her performance, I was actually really impressed by, considering she doesn't perform that much, or she's very new to performing. I think she has grown a lot over the competition. Because of the way this dress is designed and engineered to move, she doesn't need to be moving around a lot. She just needs to kind of be elegant and flowy. So she can be a little more stagnant in how she moves around the stage. She doesn't need to really do a lot. It was really magnetic, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really solid performance from her. And while at first, and then we have Throb Zombie. I loved the black roses. I love that idea. And this is the first time the entire season Throb had performance qualities in this look, with tricks and reveals and props and little stunts, and every single one of them worked. So like, good finally that it happened at the finale, good for them. Much like Neo's horror look, I significantly preferred Throb's look before reveal, before the coat came off. The coat was the statement thing to me, and I know that they still had the rose headpiece during that whole moment. I really liked the silhouette of it. I thought it was really cool. There were a couple moments where I thought Throb was gonna trip on the train, but I also noticed, obviously, the Sasha Velour rose petal moment, which, like, I don't think it was as effective as what Sasha's was. I don't think that this delivered at the same degree, but Throb's a great performer. I thought this was a really stellar performance. I was really invested in the lip sync, and I thought Throb really killed it. And Orgotic's glamour look. I think for Orgotic, this would be glamorous. I was very curious to see how they would do with glamour. What really struck me with the way they designed the prosthetic for the face and the one single sharp tooth in the center, really strong, like, kind of filmic presence with that look. What got me together, though, is that this look reminds me of something I would see in, like, Labyrinth or The Dark Crystal. It had that very, like, Brian Froud, Jim Henson creature shop quality to it, which I love. So I found it very fun to watch and very interesting, very engaging, but I also think that Orgotic was the weakest in this category. I thought the wings were interesting. I thought the texturing on it to kind of create this kind of prince character within Orgotic's realm was a cool idea. It just kind of feels like they just kind of thrown stuff together and said, here I am, here's glamour. It just didn't work for me. So, alrighty, getting into their crowning looks. Blackberries, this blue gown, and all these pearl details on the face. Now, I was very much Team Blackberry going into this finale. When I saw this look, there was a little part of me that went, please don't let Blackberry win, because I didn't want to see this look get ruined. And then I found out that apparently they still filmed the blood pour for all 4 of them. If they did, that poor gown. But it's gorgeous. This is so good. I loved this so much. Neo's look, however, when I saw, I thought, oh, she's taking it. Because to me, this look was the most practical to have the blood pour in. The least you'd have to clean or deal with, damaging, because it was some 3D printed pieces and like little accoutrements to cover up the bits and pieces. But other than that, she's just out there basically naked, which is a slay, honestly. Good for her. And spoiler alert, she's the winner. So I think it looked good. It looked good during the blood pour, what can I say? Throbb's look for this, I didn't really get a good look at. And part of that is due to the lighting, with how dark it was, and it was just all black. It looked cool. It had some cool details on the coat, or whatever the top of it was. I thought it looked interesting. I wish I could have seen it a little bit better, but I also, at the same time, don't really remember it. So it was a look at the end of the competition. Off we go. And then finally, Orgotic's look. This is my favorite Orgotic look of the entire season. So wildly different from everything else that they've done. Having this stark white entirely with the kind of scythe sickle arms in black and the metal pieces. Like, you could tell that like Orc was very happy for Neo, in the edit at least, that they won, which was very sweet to see. Jesus Christ, the idea of that stark white just covered in the blood, it really shows that Orgotic's approach with their drag and everything is often quite that cinematic appeal. I thought it looked really cool. It was a really interesting piece, and I was very impressed by it. What a strong note to go out on. And like I said, we have our new super monster. Congratulations to Neohulu X. I know I did say all season long that I didn't like her, and I still don't like the fact that she did NFTs. However, I think she's a very deserving winner. She absolutely smashed this season, knocked it out of the park, and I legitimately don't think it would have gone to anybody else. I said it last week and I will say it again. Neohulu X is like a Victoria Elizabeth Black caliber level Dragula contestant. Every single thing she did knocked it out of the park in the looks department. Every floor show was incredible. Everything worked. Everything made sense. One shortcoming was that performance challenge in the Monsters of Rock show. Definitely some of my favorite looks of the entire competition. And some of my favorite looks in the entire franchise, in all honesty. Now, that being said, in a similar vein to my other show, Very Slay, this is the last episode of the season, and I'm not gonna make another Dragula Season 5 video just to do this. To celebrate the end of the season, I wanted to do one illustration of my favorite look of the season, which will be coming very soon over on Instagram and on socials. I will also be sure to post a little sneak peek on my community tab, so keep an eye on all of that too. And we got it in this episode. So I have to say that my slay of the season is gonna go to Blackberry's glamour look. This unlocked a level of drag that I want to be able to achieve myself. I found it really inspiring. It's gorgeous, it's immaculate, it is perfection in every way. And I told her on Twitter that it was one of my favorite looks of the season, and I mean it. So even though I had a lot of complaints this season, and I had a lot of things that I did not like that were going on, and I may actively think that the Boulets have made the show worse by being the directors, I still found a lot of really enjoyable moments this season, and we all got to see incredible drag, regardless of the competition and the bullshittery and all of the drama of reality television. We got to see some immaculate drag this season. Now, I did say I was going to have a Dragula finale presentation of my own to show you all this week. I think I bit off a bit more than I can chew with these looks. So, while I will still be finishing these designs, I do want to move on and get this video out on the regularly scheduled time. So here in the order that we got them in this show, the sketch for my filth look. Here's the sketch for horror. And the sketch for glamour. This has been so fun to do these looks each and every week. I've really been enjoying the creative push. It's been also just super fun making these videos and getting into YouTube content and making that foray. I really love that the growth has been very steady, it's been very consistent. Obviously love to have even more of you in the caravan, so if you liked any of this and you want to stick around, and I've talked about it before, but we got makeup videos coming that I'm working on scripts for. We've got gaming content I'm planning out visuals and themes and everything for. So there's a lot of ideas cooking up in the kitchen. So if you want to get in on the ground floor of all of that, you all know what to do. You just hit that little button, give it a little clicky, and while you're at it, be sure to ring that bell. That way you can be among the first to know whenever a new video drops. That's it. That's the season. Yay! It's done! But seriously though, thank you all so much for all the support on this series and all this content I've been putting out. I really appreciate it. It really means the world. I'm having so much fun with this and I can't wait to share even more with all of you in the future. So, for one final time, y'all, be sure to go out there and stay kind, stay queer, and until we meet again, toodaloo!